Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 2 of my Pyanodons playthrough. In this episode, we are going to start some research on burner assemblers, and then immediately put them to use, making small parts, which is going to save us a ton of handcrafting time. Enjoy! Alright, well, we definitely want some bricks, and the build for making them is slightly different. Where we need 8 miners, but now we're going to need to have 12 furnaces. And this is going to be interesting because mining the stone actually produces the kerogen, which can be burned to power both the miners and the furnaces. And like before, we can only have a maximum of 7.5 of something. And in this case, we're actually going to have 7.5 of both the fuel and the stone. So this is the practical limit for how fast we can make it. Well, the first part's going to be the same. So we could just grab this and try to put it somewhere where it's going to make maximum use of everything. Something like that. And it looks like this belt is clearing out, so at least we can pick this stuff up. So we need to put fuel in this, but we don't really want them to power themselves by their own fuel because that might create a situation where they don't work at all. So instead we are going to pull fuel off of the main belt to do this. And we can just go straight through. They don't need to have their own special belts just because of the alignment of things. And in fact, I did this wrong because we actually want to populate both sides. And how much are we going to need? Well, I told it that it's going to burn its own kerogen, but I changed my mind halfway through, apparently. And there it goes. That will give us a fully populated belt of equal amounts of stone and kerogen on it, and it will be a mixed belt, so despite all of our efforts to not have our ores mixed, they're always going to be mixed with stone, and it might be that they built it that way specifically so you wouldn't be afraid of it, but nonetheless, I'm kind of afraid of it. But at least in this case, we'll always be able to burn the kerogen away just as a byproduct, rather than, let's say we had iron and copper being pulled together. That means that we would have to use equal amounts of both for it to work, and it would be awkward. So that's that. Now we need 12 of these, so we know kind of what it's going to look like, but there's also another step that's in here. Let's just, put it right there for now. Because now, what we have to do is sort this, because it's going to be a mixed belt, and it needs to not be a mixed belt. So we're going to have our 7.5, and I believe we calculated that we needed to have 10 inserters to fully handle 7.5 items, and that will be each side of the belt. So the kerogen will go up. And to make it easy, we can do a blacklist of kerogen on the bottom, which will obviously handle the stone. Although I don't know, maybe we should just do a whitelist of stone, because there's probably some edge case where something pollutes the belt, and then we would be glad that they didn't get moved along. So this right here is 10, so we need to have 2 more. And finally, we need to position it somewhere. Is this okay? Probably. You do kind of want to space stuff with pie because you never know when you're going to need the room. And in goes the fuel. Might as well connect this too. So the ash goes to where it needs to. We need to connect this, but also we need somewhere for all that kerogen to go. And that is going to have to come all the way back here to the back of this. And things get awkward. Welcome to Pi. It's going to be pretty crazy compared to whatever you're used to. Okay, so when we hook this up, we should see it sort all of this junk and then send it to the furnaces. So looking good there. Hopefully this is all on the correct side. In goes the stone and out comes the bricks. And they will get held onto. And looking at the recipe here, it's 2 stone into 1 brick. So you get a lot more bricks per your stone compared to the iron and copper plates. But that's looking good. We certainly don't need to hold on to stone, and kerogen too for that matter. And the both of them can get just placed into here, and hopefully this will be enough, and they will find where they need to go. We do want to hold some stone though for making furnaces and things. So we'll need another chest somewhere. Let's just put it there, pulling off like 1 stack for now. And it has clogged because all of that kerogen has nowhere to go. So we need to pipe it in the back of here, but also we kind of want to try to split it to both sides if possible. Of course, it's just going to give priority to one side or the other, but welcome to Pi. You don't have to deal with this for too long, but they do limit your access to things you would consider Factorio staples, like the splitter, for some amount of time. And it does give you the experience of unique logistical challenges that you just wouldn't experience. And we could use a circuit network for this, but I do want to try to avoid using the wires because technically we unlocked them pretty much immediately here. It says unlock the circuit network, but you don't actually need items to create it anymore. You can just make the wires. So right out of the gate, we could do a circuit condition to make this work. But I'm going to give myself a little extra challenge and just not use circuits unless they're absolutely required. And this is one of those situations where you just kind of put some inserters on one side, and technically I guess we would want 5. And now you see the Carriagin is going to completely pollute our entire bus. But not much can be done. If we want to make stone, we have to burn that Carriagin away. And you probably could have started your factory build in a different way, where you started with the stone first and then you had the Carriagin, which could have just been used for anything. But I kind of like to do it in this order instead. But now we have bricks. And looking at the actual item itself, it is a 150% walking speed. So right out of the gate, regular stone bricks give you the same walking bonus that refined concrete would in vanilla. And since we are very limited on our concrete for now, we probably should just make a few roads going all the places we would want to go. Of course, it's all going to be covered soon, but that kind of shows you the incredible walking difference just the bricks do. So definitely want to pave your factory. So I was a little concerned about the lack of scenery here. It's a very plain ice shelf that we're on. But I also knew that very quickly we were just going to have a bunch of stone bricks, and it wouldn't matter because the factory must be concrete. The funny thing about making stone bricks is the rate we make them is based on how fast can we burn the Carriagin away. And it's going slow right now because it's got all of this coal it has to go through, but then once it hits the Carriagin, it's going to rapidly disappear. We actually have an automated factory where we don't have to touch anything, and it's working. And here we go. Losing resources, and I tend to just let it slow down as it does, and then once it gets to the point where we're getting really frustrated at the lack of production, then I'll put another line down and do whatever craziness we need to. Okay, now that we have this automated, we can actually start doing some research. And we are going to be doing it by hand. And the question is, what do we want to research first? It's a trick question. The answer is, of course, assembly, because we need to have automation. Doing so will give us access to the burner assembling machine, which requires some basic stuff, and also iron chests. It's quite expensive at 8 iron plates, but it doesn't use trees. So we'll see which one we want to do. And that's going to require 12 science packs. We're going to handcraft these, and looking at the resources, the 2 that we don't have that would go into this is the native flora and the dirt. So the dirt is easy. It requires a soil extractor that can go anywhere. So we need to build one. And it looks like we need more copper. And there we go. We make it. And of course, giant crafting queue. But once we have our assemblers, we'll be able to start automating the production of just everything we need. And just like that, we have 800 bricks. So at the beginning, we'll want to run the bricks everywhere we might find ourselves walking. And that is a huge improvement to what we've been dealing with for the past 2 hours or so. And there we go. We can basically walk anywhere we need to go. Okay, we've got our soil extractor. And if we put it anywhere... Uh-oh, it requires electricity. So we're going to need power. I didn't talk about it before, but now I will. The way that it works is the same, where you have the boiler, it makes steam at 250 degrees, and then that steam goes into a steam engine. So first difference, I'm pretty sure the vanilla boilers are like 165 degrees, something like that. So these do go hotter, and also the steam engines go hotter. So they have a maximum temperature of 500. So you can put 250 steam in there. It's not that the steam engines are less efficient, they just don't make the same amount of power. So if you theoretically had a boiler that was at 500 degrees, it would produce twice the power out of the same machines. In other words, the main thing that you would save is water, that the steam would be more effective. Also note that the efficiency of the steam engine is only 50%. So the other big change, if you remember in vanilla Factorio, it's 1 boiler to 2 steam engines. Well, get that out of your head because the boiler produces 7.5 steam and the steam engines consume 15. So now it is 2-to-1 ratio here instead of 1-to-2. And it only uses 7.5 water a second, and the offshore pumps put out the expected 1200, and we don't know how much power we're going to need, but for now we'll do the 2-to-1 ratio because of course we want to do a build for this. And this should probably be near water, but at the same time it's going to be consuming, hey, achievement, these resources here. And in fact, because power is going to consume the most resources compared to anything else, it should probably be pulling off of the main belt directly. It's kind of bad for this to be at the end because it wouldn't have priority, but I think we should do that. And in this case, I'm going to do a build real quick. And here it is. There's not much to it, but I wanted to have the numbers. So we're only going to get 3.8 megawatts out of this because it only has 250 degree steam, so it's half the efficiency. But the main thing I wanted to do was find out how much coal it uses. We need to calculate how many inserters we're going to need. That we have 2.47 divided by 0.77, which means we're going to need 3.2 inserters, but we have 2 machines, which means we're going to need 4. But what happens if we had kerogen? We would need to have basically 50% more inserters. So 2.47 times 1.5, and now divided by 0.77. And it means we would need to have 6 total inserters. And that's fine, but we also need to get rid of ash. So let's make a example build of this somewhere, because we want something that can be tiled because we're going to be making a lot of these. And what I like to do is have the boiler on the end and then have the steam engine over here and then have another one on the other side. So we're going to have fuel going in essentially on both sides, but also we need to have the ash removed. So we can have belts there, and then inserters pulling off of it, being whitelisted for ash, where the steam goes underneath, and then we would have inputs on this side. And you could make this one square smaller by just putting this here and having an underground. That would still work, but it would require a bunch of undergrounds. And right now our resources are kind of being spread thin, so I'd rather not do that. So this works. Now you could put 3 inserters on this side. That would give it a higher burst capacity, especially as it relates to running on kerogen. But also, it will eventually fill up on ash if you do that. So it's kind of up to you if you want it to be balanced or not. Usually I have it with 3 inserters on each side, but let's see how it works with just 2. So that's the build. Of course, now we have to pick it up. I really don't want to put it right next to the water. Oh wow, this is getting drained very quickly. It is on the end of the patch. I just noted that even though I have the mod where when we pick up an inserter, we'll pick up the item off the ground too. But nonetheless, I'm still doing inserters first because I just can't get out of the habit of doing that. We'll let this go for now. As long as we have enough ore, it's fine. But we're going to need to have a lot of room to expand this and also deal with the ash. And I don't know, put it up here. Because this isn't full size, because we're going to keep extending this, that for now, so we don't have to pull up belts, because if I put this over here and we wanted to make this bigger, I would just have to pull up the belts again. I kind of wanted to do the side switching on this side for now. And as always, more and more and more bricks. Until this factory is completely paved, I will not be happy. And we could just put the chest right here, I suppose. That would save us some resources, and there'll be room for the belts later. But at least you know what it's going to look like when it's complete. Now we need the offshore pump. And of course, lots and lots of undergrounds. So how about it goes, like, all the way up here. If you are unfamiliar with Factorio 2.0's way of handling pipes, that it handles them in extent. Basically, that's an individual pipe section that's allowed to be up to 320 tiles long. Whether it's underground or not doesn't matter. And you can see right here, it tells us what the pipe extent is. And if you go past that pipe extent, then the only way to keep going is to put a pump in there to pressurize the system again. And we don't actually have access to pumps right now, so we are limited right now to no more than 320 tiles away from the water. Water's going in there, and it's crossing over, and the total extent of the system is 168, or about half of what we're allowed. So in goes the mixed fuel, and it's just gonna pull whatever it has access to, and so be it. The kerogen will just be a pollutant to the belt, and you can see its fuel consumption is extremely fast, and it's just barely fast enough with the kerogen. We now have steam and a flashing light because it's not connected to power, and here we go. There go all of our logs. Yay! We're gonna want to walk up here sometime, I imagine, so let's just make a path. And another one is empty. These other ones are actually not far behind. So the reason why I don't really feel like replacing these quite yet is that it's going to be difficult to give priority to one side or the other. So if I put them like down here and then turn around, these ones on the bottom will actually have priority over these ones. And we want these ones to have priority. So what we would actually have to do is make the belt go this way and then turn around. And I mean, we could do that. That should give us what we need. Let's make sure it all looks right. Of course it doesn't because the sides are wrong. That it actually does need to move this direction instead. And then this has to realign with the other belt. Let's move this out of the way just so it's easy to see where the ore is. And that is absolutely the wrong side. That is what I was worried about. We can put them around there, which will give priority for these miners. And then awkwardly, we will have these resources that need to come in, so talk about a snake. But in doing so, that will prioritize these miners and just get rid of them, so that line of iron has been cleared out. And this is another example of weird pie stuff that you do, at least in the early game. Now we actually need to produce this soil somewhere. It doesn't matter where. Of course, we're going to want to automate these science packs. But for now, since it really doesn't matter, we can just put the soil extractor anywhere. And you notice that it has input and output pipes on both sides, so it really doesn't matter where we put it. Also note that this building has an arrow on it, and that arrow is the same that you get on miners. So what that means is this building will actually dump its resources out without you using inserters. You can use inserters, but nonetheless, it's still going to dump its output onto that square, so you might as well make use of it. For now, we'll put a chest here and just limit it to 1. And it being so close to the steam engine means we won't need to have a ton of power poles. So for now, just those 3 poles will do it. And you throw a bunch of water in, and you get a bunch of soil out. And it's a pretty fast machine, and now we have our first electricity consumer. It's not much, but there it goes. And we're going to be doing some handcrafting, so we might as well keep track of that. The other thing that we're going to need is our flora, and that is captured in a flora collector, which requires a bunch of stuff, but we have the bunch of stuff. Man, look at this queue. It's so much stuff for one building. And we're starting to get enough bricks now to where instead of making walking paths, I feel like we can just start paving in earnest. And let's put that flora on our list. Because of their proximity, we won't really have room for them to overlap with the iron, but it also doesn't matter because burner miner drills can't mine the flora, and the flora miners can't mine the iron. And we will certainly run out of iron before the flora, so eventually we will be able to max this patch out, but not right now while we have iron here. And it's kind of a weird building. It's not quite clear where the lines of the building are, and in fact it does mine 1 square bigger than its shape, and also you've got all of these green squares showing you where the flora actually is. And those squares are in the middle of the tile that the flora collector can collect. If we do this, it will cover everything, and you notice it has the arrow like the other miners, and that is where it's going to dump its resources. So we put it in, and it really isn't a building. It's basically just robots and a geofence, essentially. But we'll put a chest there, 1 square, and now we need to run power lines down here. Let's just do that. And there we go. So, looking at flora, we have our first decay item, or spoilage item. So the decay time of this is 3 hours and 20 minutes, so that's not too bad. We don't really need to worry about it. Eventually we will, but for now it's okay. Tastes like cinnamon, in a good way or a bad way. But let's search the recipe book here, because we want to see what it decays into. And that starfish looking thing, I see spoil and flora in there. The result of flora over-ripening. And note that flora can be burned. It has a horrible fuel value of 175. Note that the decay product actually has way more fuel value, so if you wanted to burn it, you're almost certainly better off letting it spoil. And then if you give it another 3 hours and 20 minutes, it will turn into biomass. And that biomass only has 250. So we will eventually have to have some logic in here, either by circuit network or by inserters. But that's 3 hours away from now. We don't need to worry about that. We can just collect the flora and have it on our list. So it's a lot of handcrafting, but we'll do that, and we got an achievement. Grab more soil, make more packs. And it does actually use quite a bit of flora, but I want to minimize. Oh wow, multiple achievements. It seems like those are essentially the same thing and they don't need to have their own achievements, but oh well. And note that this recipe, at least to make the planter box, does require ash, so we do have a use for it, even though it's mostly a byproduct right now. And we accidentally had plenty of ash in our inventory, so it's not something we really need to worry about. And basically our entire factory is running on kerogen right now, which is what you would expect when we are burning through stone like there's no tomorrow, because paving the factory must occur. It's so much better than walking on that snow. And there we go. These are empty. So now all of this doesn't need to occur anymore. It still needs to go around here because the way we built it requires that to happen, so it's on the right side. And I do want to pick that up just because undergrounds are valuable right now, so I'd rather have it in our inventory. And to research, we will of course need some labs, and luckily the labs aren't that expensive. And I guess we didn't look at the electricity consumption of this, but it's 100. So compared to the soil extractor, well, if we can see it, the soil extractor is a much bigger hog of resources. And let's build, how about 4 labs? Each one is only 60 kilowatts, so they are quite efficient for power. They are huge buildings, but that's fine. We can put them basically anywhere. They are very tall, and you run into this in Pi, where the visual size of the building is much bigger than the amount of space it takes. So if we put it here, we wouldn't even see what's going on here. So you do want to be careful where you put it and try to place it somewhere where its size isn't going to be annoying. And can we walk between these? We can, but nonetheless I think I'm going to space them. That is something that you want to keep in mind, that spacing the buildings is actually kind of important. So if you have big builds, you might want to consider artificial spaces. I already placed it, so I'll leave it there, but my intent was to hand insert these anyway because they're not automated, so what difference does it make? But in they go. Those are all of the science packs, so these 1 labs will work for all of these. And they're moderately fast. It's going to take about 2 minutes to do this. And there's our energy consumption. It's not too bad. The steam engines in Pi, I feel, are way more powerful than vanilla. That the output of a standard quality steam engine in vanilla is 900 kilowatts, whereas this one, well, if it had full power steam, is 7.6 megawatts, but even with half power steam, it's still 3.7. So they are much more powerful than vanilla. So this will actually last us for a little while. Oh yeah, and I made 4 labs, not 3 labs. All done. There's assembly, so there's no point in moving forward until we have automated things with our burner assemblers. Before we continue, one thing I noticed here is that the symbol here is red, and I believe it is under the idle condition. And in this case, it's idling because it is not full of output and it is not empty of input. So besides not having a recipe, this is another thing that can cause that. However, I think this is a uniqueness of the furnaces, because most machines only fill up with a certain number of recipes. They don't max out on resources like this, and then this display will be correct. So for example, and it looks like we've got a little bit of iron stuck in there from when the belt was messed up, we can put our iron in here to get it going one more time, and when it gets to the end here, now that it has a full output, it has switched to blue. So that is a little visual error that I don't think is really worth fixing, because this is only applying to the stone furnaces here. But another thing I realized is that I actually had the toggle minimap on the entire time. So you see how it kind of flickers. So if you don't want the minimap to turn off, this mod can be a little jarring. So I actually normally like it to be off. So it looks like this, and I just didn't notice until now. But I like to turn that off only when the information scrolls off the bottom of the screen and there's something I wanted to see there. So with that, it's time to continue. Now that we have automation, we can start automating. And the first thing we should automate should probably be the small parts, because we build a lot of them and that's the main time sink. And I made a build for this, and I actually did it a little while ago because I was getting excited and then I realized, oh yeah, we don't have assemblers yet. So here's the build, and I kind of need to audit it real quick, but you'll notice that all of the assemblers are running at a speed of less than 1, and that's because they're actually inserter limited. That even though it's a burner assembler, it's actually kind of fast. So first, let's cover what goes into these small parts. And the parts are kind of scattered across a couple of these different menus here, but these small parts come from gears, cable, and bolts. The bolts come from sticks, and the sticks come from plates, the gears come from plates, and of course, the copper cable comes from the copper plates. So I say we need to audit this because I chose 2.31 for the limiting speed of the machines, because that's what 3 inserters can do, but we need to make sure we can actually fit all of the relevant inserters on the machine. So it's funny that we have all of these machines, but the fastest machine, or in other words, the machine that's going to run the least, is actually the small parts machine, that it's only going to be running 20% of the time. So try to imagine this. We have 12 slots that we can use. We're going to be putting 3 inserters on one end, that's going to be the copper cable, 3 inserters on the other end, which is going to be the bolts, and then we need to have exactly 1 inserter going in, let's just say at the top, for the gears. And that's definitely a new feature where it hides things you can't see. I'm not sure how to disable that. Let's see here. There's a couple things I do like to change on here. Like, I prefer it to be 1 line there, just saves you some screen real estate. Okay, it looks like it's probably this display hidden products, and it's how small does the product have to be to not be included. So if we do 0, it's always going to show them, and it's just hiding them because they're small, but I think I would prefer that they all be there. We also need to input the fuel somewhere, and ideally we would also output the ash, so we would need another one. And we also need to output the products, which would require 2 inserters. So if I have done this correctly, this one assembler is going to be using 11 inserters to get the job done. Now we need to build this somewhere, and this is going to be a minibus, so we would want to put it somewhere where a minibus would make sense. It's going to be taking the plates from these 2 setups. Yeah, how about we start it like right here, because in the future some belts might come down here and we don't want them to go over the aluminum patch. And other than being a burner assembler, it's not all that different than the vanilla one, except its crafting speed is double. And it also has pipes on it. So it basically does everything you would need it to. And there's another example of the red light that's kind of erroneous, and we'll just put up with it for now. And it can be kind of difficult to follow what's going on here. You just have to imagine it in your head, like we have here and basically anywhere else, where the input needs to be on the near side of the belt and the output needs to be on the far side, so that way the sides are correct. And yes, this could be a lot easier if you had like Bob's adjustable inserters, but I think Pi is supposed to be difficult like this, and using all those mods negates a lot of the challenge. But of course, if you want to use them, just use them, because it's your game. But that's my opinion about it. So usually I like to do things in mirrors here, so we can have the input of fuel there, the output there, and whenever you're outputting anything out of a burner assembler, you need to remember, is it ash blacklist or ash whitelist? In this case, it's ash whitelist. These, assuming that the burner they're going into don't use ash, then they don't need to have any inserters. They'll only insert what the machine actually needs. And now we have another inserter here, and it's going to be ash blacklist. The reason why we're not going to belt gears is basically why we're not belting anything else, is because we only have so many slots of putting resources in, and it gets kind of awkward to do this. Plus, gears are so simple, we can basically just build them anywhere. And then we have our 2 outputs here, and we are going to need enough of these where we want to put them on their own belt. And hopefully that should be everything. This is going to be so much faster when we actually have all the spare parts in our inventory. So we need another fuel belt, to come in here, and we already have the fuel belt there. And burner assemblers use very little power. I mean, they're the same as the Factorio assemblers are. So you see this entire build, when it's going at full blast, is only going to be 0.05 coal a second. And we have no hope of filling it up with these resources right now. The reason why I went with those numbers is eventually our factory will be able to supply that, and also the belt will have a bit of a buffer on it. So in goes the kerogen. As terrible as it is, it's plenty for these assembling machines. And now they are yellow because they don't have any resources. Let's put in the iron first, make sure everything works correctly. Seemingly. And yes, this machine could be made faster by putting more inserters on it, but I'd rather have them all be bounced with each other. And now we put in the copper, and we can see this working. And there we go. You can see how underutilized this machine is, but we've basically fully maxed it out. It only has so many slots, and we need to pick up items for our personal uses. And since there's 2 doing output, we are going to need to have 2 picking them up. So, to test it out, we pick up a bunch of small parts and say we want 5 inserters. Oh, look how much easier that is. So, so this is going to be a good thing. So that's kind of an example of how you do builds in Pi with the burner assemblers. And we're going to need to do something with the ash eventually, but if there's no room to get the ash off of the assemblers, you don't really need to worry about it because they use fuel so slowly that it's going to take hours for it to fill up 1000 ash. And even if you don't do anything with the ash, you probably would only need to manually remove it like once or twice before you will replace these machines. So you don't really have to do it, but if there's a slot on the machine, you might as well get rid of the ash so you don't have to think about it. And that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we're going to expand our minibus to other things we need, but most importantly, fully automate science. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.